The millionaire caught the nanny sleeping on the floor, exhausted. He didn't imagine the reason, much less what would come next. Seeing the letter next to her, her hands shake. That night, his and her lives would change forever. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. We continue. The sky over the capital had that typical orange hue of sunset when Tiago Albuquerque Müller left yet another charity event on Avenida Principal. At 38 years old, heir to one of the largest real estate empires in the country, he felt the weight of his surname as a burden that was increasingly difficult to bear. Inside the limousine that took him back to his penthouse apartment in Valberia, Tiago loosened his Armani tie and sighed, exhausted not only physically, but spiritually. "Is there a problem, sir?" asked Jonas, his driver for over a decade. "Nothing. Out of the ordinary, Jonas. Just another event where everyone wants something from me, but no one really wants to meet me." The limousine glided silently through the tree-lined streets, passing mansions hidden behind high walls and sophisticated security systems. Tiago looked out the window, watching ordinary people returning from work, couples holding hands in the park, children playing, simple lives that at that moment seemed to possess a priceless value that all his money could not buy. In the lobby of the luxurious IP building, the doorman greeted him with the same reverence as always. "Good evening, Mr. Müller. I hope you had a good day." Tiago forced a smile. "Thank you, Stefan. How is your family?" The doorman's face lit up at the question. "My daughter got into medical school, sir. First in the family." "That's wonderful." "Stefan, tell her my congratulations." For a moment, Tiago felt a pang of genuine envy. Stefan, on his modest salary, seemed happier and more fulfilled than he had ever been. The panoramic elevator rose silently to the 30th floor. When the doors opened directly onto the entrance to his triplex penthouse, Tiago was greeted by the oppressive silence that had become his only constant companion. The lights automatically came on, revealing the 850 square meters of luxury meticulously decorated by a renowned interior designer. Works of art valued at millions adorned the walls, but none of them touched his soul as they used to. He walked to the bar, poured himself a 30-year-old whiskey, and headed to the balcony that offered a panoramic view of the city that never slept. The capital stretched out at his feet like a carpet of lights, a vibrant metropolis full of dreams, struggles, loves, and disappointments. However, from his glass and concrete tower, Tiago felt completely disconnected from it all. His phone buzzed, probably another invitation to another social event where he would have to keep up appearances. He ignored it. Instead, he decided to walk around the other floors of his apartment, something he rarely did. The second floor housed 3 guest suites that never received visitors, a pristine office where he rarely worked, and a movie theater where he watched movies alone. It was when he reached the 3rd floor, reserved for his sister and nephews, when they visited him from Nueva Malta, that Tiago found something out of the ordinary. In the darkness of the hallway, he noticed a human form huddled near the door to the children's room. His heart raced momentarily until, approaching cautiously, he identified a young woman asleep on the floor, her head resting on a small pillow, improvised from a coat. For a moment he considered calling security, but something about the scene stopped him. The woman was fast asleep, strands of curly hair falling over her serene face. She was dressed simply, jeans, a t-shirt with the name of an art exhibition on it, and worn sneakers. Beside her, a contemporary art book lay open, and a sketchbook displayed impressive charcoal drawings. Tiago then remembered the message from his sister, Fernanda. She had mentioned that she had hired a new nanny for the twins, Gustavo and Gabriel, when they came to visit him over the weekend. The nanny would arrive a day early to familiarize herself with the apartment. Apparently, this was the woman sleeping in the hallway. "Miss?" he called softly, touching her shoulder lightly. The woman opened her eyes with a start, standing up quickly. "My God. I'm sorry, Mr. Müller. I just sat down to read for a while and must have fallen asleep. Your sister told me you'd be late and—" "It's okay," Tiago interrupted her, noticing the embarrassment in her dark brown eyes. "So you must be Louisa, right?" "Yes, Louisa Corvin." She nervously fixed her voluminous hair, trying to look more presentable. "I'm really sorry about that. It's very unprofessional of me." There was something genuinely unassuming about her that contrasted with everything Tiago was used to. As he watched Louisa gather her belongings, he noticed that her hands had small ink stains on them. "Are you an artist?" he asked, pointing to the sketchbook. Louisa hesitated, as if the question had touched on something painful. "I have," she finally replied. "Now I'm a babysitter, and I do some illustration work to make ends meet." There was a story there, Tiago could feel it. A real story, not like the fabricated ones he heard at local high society parties. "Have you had dinner yet?" he asked impulsively. Louisa seemed surprised by the question. "No, but don't worry, I can make something for myself in the kitchen, if you'll allow me." "Please call me Tiago, and I would like to invite you to dinner with me. I know an excellent restaurant nearby." The words were out of his mouth before he could think, surprising himself. It wasn't like him to invite employees to meals, much less someone he had just met. I'm not dressed appropriately to go out with you," she replied, looking down at her simple clothes. "Don't worry about it. The place I have in mind doesn't care about appearances." Louisa studied him for a moment, as if trying to decipher his intentions. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, thanks for the invite." Half an hour later, to Jonas's surprise, who rarely saw his boss go out twice in the same night, Tiago and Louisa were on their way not to a Michelin-starred restaurant, as one would expect, but to a small Italian cantina. Trattoria del Vento was a family-run establishment tucked away on a narrow street, away from the spotlights and cameras that usually followed Tiago. Upon entering, they were greeted by the owner, Mr. Giuseppe, a 70-year-old Italian who had immigrated to the country when he was young. "Tiago, how long, figlio mio? And who is this beautiful signorina?" "This is Louisa, a friend," Tiago replied, surprised at how naturally the word friend came out. They were seated at a table in the back where they could chat without being disturbed. The atmosphere was welcoming, with red and white checkered tablecloths, candles in empty wine bottles, and the irresistible aroma of homemade tomato sauce permeating the air. "How do you know this place?" Louisa asked, visibly more relaxed now. "It doesn't seem like the kind of restaurant someone like you would go to." "Someone like me?" he smiled. "And what kind would that be?" "You know, billionaire, socialite, always in the gossip columns." Tiago laughed, a genuine laugh he hadn't experienced in a long time. "I've been coming here since college. It was the only place I could afford when I decided to live on my own for a while, against my father's wishes." Louisa's eyes widened in surprise. "Have you ever lived on your own?" "For 2 years. I wanted to prove I could build something, without the Müller name opening doors. I worked as a waiter here at night while I tried to start an independent art gallery. And what happened?" Tiago's smile disappeared. "My father got sick. I had to come back to take over the family business." Louisa observed him with a new perspective, as if she could see beyond the facade of the successful businessman. "What about art?" she asked softly. "It's behind us, as it seems to be behind us for you too." The wine was poured, a simple but delicious Chianti. Tiago raised his glass in a silent toast, and Louisa did the same. Their eyes met over the flickering flames of the candles, and something indefinable passed between them, a mutual recognition, perhaps, of souls who had lost their true paths. That night, as they ate homemade pasta and shared stories, the social barriers that would normally separate them began to crumble. In Louisa, Tiago found something rare in his world: authenticity. And in Tiago, Louisa saw something beyond the stereotype of the bored rich man. She saw a man trapped in a life he did not choose. What neither of them could have imagined, as they returned to their apartment hours later, was how that chance encounter would fundamentally change the course of their lives, and how, in the near future, they would discover that fate had connected them long before that night. The next morning, Tiago woke up with an unusual feeling. For the first time in years, he felt light, as if the conversation the night before had lifted an invisible weight from his shoulders. The digital clock on his bedside table read 7:30. Normally, at this time, he would already be at the office dealing with phone calls and signing contracts. Today, however, something was urging him to stay home. After a long shower, he changed into casual clothes, a rare feat for a man whose wardrobe consisted mostly of tailored Italian suits. As he walked down to the second floor, he heard children's laughter coming from the kitchen. His nephews, 6-year-old twins Gustavo and Gabriel, had arrived earlier than expected along with their sister Fernanda. "Uncle Tiago!" they shouted in unison when they saw him, running to hug his legs. "Those little brats insisted on coming so early," Fernanda explained, kissing her brother's cheek. "I hope we didn't interrupt your schedule." "No way," Tiago replied, surprising himself. Normally, any change in his routine would deeply irritate him. His eyes met Louisa's, who was making pancakes for the children. She smiled shyly, a smile that seemed to carry a shared secret from the night before. She was wearing a flowery skirt that reached her knees and a simple blouse, but there was something about her presence that transformed the space around her. "Good morning, Tiago," she said, and the use of his first name did not go unnoticed by Fernanda, who raised a questioning eyebrow. "You've already met, I see," Fernanda commented, watching the interaction between her brother and the nanny closely. "Yes, we met last night," Tiago replied casually. "We ended up having dinner together at Trattoria del Vento." Fernanda almost choked on her coffee. "Did you take Luisa to your secret hideaway? Not even I have permission to go there with you." Tiago shrugged, trying to minimize the significance of that gesture. But he knew his sister was right. The cantina was his personal sanctuary, the only place in the capital where he could just be Tiago, not a mullah. "Uncle, come see what Aunt Lou taught me to draw," exclaimed Gabriel, pulling him by the hand to the kitchen table, where several colorful drawings were spread out. "Aunt Lou?" asked Tiago, surprised by the intimacy already established between his nephews and Louisa. "They started calling me that since we met," Louisa explained. "I hope you don't mind." "Not at all," he replied, bending down to examine the children's drawings. "These are really good. You had a great teacher." "Aunt Lou draws better than anyone," Gustavo declared with childish conviction. "She makes pictures this big." The boy spread his arms as wide as he could to illustrate the size. Tiago gave Louisa a questioning look, who suddenly looked uncomfortable. "Kids exaggerate," she said, looking away. Fernanda, who had been watching the scene with growing interest, decided to intervene. "Louisa is too modest. When I hired her, I didn't know I was employing an award-winning artist. I found out by chance when I recognized her name from an exhibition catalogue." Tiago's eyes widened. "Awarded?" "I'd rather not talk about it," Louisa interrupted, her voice now tense. "If you'll excuse me, I'm going to organize the children's activities for today." She left the kitchen quickly, leaving an awkward silence behind. "What happened?" Tiago asked his sister in a low voice as the twins went back to focusing on their drawings. Fernanda sighed. "I don't know all the details. I only know that she was considered one of the most promising contemporary artists in the country. She had exhibitions in several places, even internationally. Then, suddenly, she simply disappeared from the art scene about 2 years ago." Tiago felt a growing curiosity about the mysterious nanny. The conversation the night before had only scratched the surface, revealing a complex woman with layers he longed to explore. After breakfast, Fernanda left to take care of work matters in the capital, leaving the twins in Louisa's care. Tiago, against all his habits, cancelled his meetings for the day, claiming he was suddenly feeling unwell. The morning passed with Tiago quietly observing how Louisa interacted with the children. She was not only patient and caring, but also incredibly creative, turning simple activities into extraordinary adventures. For lunch, she prepared a simple but delicious meal, teaching the twins to help in the kitchen, something Tiago's maids would never allow. In the early afternoon, when the boys were taking a nap, Tiago found Louisa on the balcony, looking at the city with a thoughtful expression. "You don't have to babysit," he said, joining her. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. Louisa turned, her eyes meeting his. "No, I don't need to. But I chose to." "Why?" She hesitated, as if deciding how much of herself she was willing to reveal. "Children are honest," she finally replied. "They don't judge, they don't have impossible expectations. With them, I can simply be Louisa, not the promising artist." The new sensation, the sure bet. Tiago nodded, understanding perfectly what she meant. It was no different from what he felt under the weight of the Müller name. "What happened?" he asked gently. "With your artistic career, I mean." Louisa took a deep breath, turning back to the urban landscape in front of her. "I had a relationship with my agent, Ricardo. He was brilliant, charismatic, and knew everyone in the art world. He was the one who discovered my talent when I was still exhibiting in small galleries in the center of the capital." Tiago listened attentively, realizing how hard it was for her to share that story. "In 2 years, I went from being an unknown artist to critically acclaimed. My works began to sell for increasingly higher prices. I was invited to exhibit in Paris, New York, Tokyo." She paused, her fingers tightening on the balcony railing. "Then I discovered that Ricardo was manipulating everything. He created a narrative about me that sold well, the young artist from the outskirts who overcame all adversities. He exaggerated my story, invented details of my childhood to make it more saleable. I discovered that he also manipulated the values of my works, taking higher percentages than agreed." "That's terrible," Tiago commented, genuinely outraged. "That wasn't the worst part," Louisa continued, her voice lower now. "When I confronted him, he laughed in my face. He said that without him I would be nothing, that my talent was mediocre, and that the only reason I was selling was because of the story he had created around me. He said I should be grateful that he had transformed a street painter into a recognized artist." Tiago felt a growing anger towards Ricardo, a man who had crushed someone's dreams out of pure selfishness and greed. "And you believed him?" Louisa gave a sad smile. "The worst part is that yes, I believed it. I started to question all my work, my talent. Did people really appreciate my art, or were they just buying into a story? I fell into a spiral of self-doubt so deep that I could no longer create. Every brushstroke felt fake, every color felt wrong." She turned to face him again, and Tiago saw a vulnerability in her eyes that touched him deeply. "So you gave up," he concluded. "I prefer to say that I walked away," Louisa corrected. "I cancelled all my scheduled exhibitions, broke my contract with the gallery and disappeared. I moved to a small apartment and started working as a nanny. It's honest work, without pretensions, without lies." Tiago remained silent for a few moments, processing everything he had heard. Finally, he made an impulsive decision. "Come with me," he said, holding out his hand to her. "I want to show you something." Louisa hesitated, but eventually accepted his hand. Tiago led her through the apartment until she reached a door at the end of the second-floor hallway, a door that remained locked most of the time. "No one but my sister knows about this place," he explained, as he inserted a key into the lock. The door opened to reveal a fully equipped art studio, with easels, paints, brushes, blank canvases, and several unfinished works on the walls. "Are you an artist?" asked Louisa, genuinely surprised. "It used to be," Tiago replied, stepping into the dusty studio. "Like you, I had to give up my dreams, in my case, to embrace the destiny that my surname demanded." Louisa walked around the studio, looking closely at the unfinished works. They were urban landscapes of the capital, but with a unique approach. They showed the city from unusual perspectives, revealing the beauty hidden in alleys, peripheral communities, and abandoned buildings. "This is extraordinary," she murmured, pausing before a screen showing a favela at sunset, the lights of the simple houses creating a golden mosaic against the purple sky. "You have a unique eye for finding beauty, where most see only decay." Tiago felt a warmth in his chest when he heard those words. It was the first time in years that someone had commented on his art sincerely, without trying to please him for his name or money. "The last picture I painted," he said, pointing to a covered canvas in the corner. "I never showed it to anyone." Louisa approached the covered screen, looking at Tiago as if asking for permission. He nodded, and she removed the cloth covering her. It was a self-portrait, but an unconventional one. It showed Tiago dressed in an impeccable suit, surrounded by symbols of wealth and power. Yet his face was fragmented like a broken mirror, and through the cracks one could see another version of him, younger, freer, painting in a simple studio. Luisa was silent for a long moment, absorbing the intensity of the work. "When did you paint this?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The night before I officially took over as president of Müller Companies after my father's death." A child's joyful cry broke the introspective moment. The twins had woken up and were looking for them. Before they left the studio, Luisa turned to Tiago. "Why are you showing me this?" Tiago thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe because, in some way, you remind me of who I could have been." That afternoon, as he watched Luisa playing with her nephews in the rooftop garden, Tiago felt something awaken within him, a connection that went beyond physical or intellectual attraction. It was as if somehow their souls recognized each other. What he didn't know yet was how much this recognition would change his life, nor the family secrets that were about to come to light, connecting their destinies in ways neither of them could have imagined. The following days brought a subtle change to Tiago's routine. For the first time in years, he began arriving home earlier, eager to spend time with his nephews, and though he would not openly admit it, with Luisa. Her presence had brought a renewed vitality to his luxurious apartment that had previously felt more like a design showroom than a home. On a particularly pleasant afternoon, while the twins were taking a nap, Tiago found Luisa on the balcony, with her sketchbook on her lap, tracing soft lines that captured the urban landscape of the capital. "You can't stop, can you?" he asked, sitting down in the chair next to her. Luisa smiled without taking her eyes off the drawing. "It's like breathing. Even when I try to stop, my fingers find a paper, a napkin, anything to draw." "I miss that feeling," Tiago confessed, "of creating something that comes from within, not just signing documents and closing deals." She finally looked at him, her brown eyes studying his face intently. "Why don't you come back, even if it's just for the weekends?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities. "I guess I'm scared," he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. "Scared that I'll find out I've lost it forever." "I understand that fear better than anyone," Luisa said softly. A comfortable silence settled between them, filled only by the distant sounds of the city and the light scratching of charcoal on paper. "I have an idea," Tiago said suddenly, straightening up in his chair. "What if we organized an exhibition?" "An exhibition?" Luisa looked confused. "Of what?" "Of art. Your art. My art. Art of young talents who need an opportunity." Luisa let out a nervous laugh. "You're kidding, right? I haven't exhibited in 2 years." "Exactly. It's about time." Tiago leaned forward, filled with an enthusiasm he hadn't felt in years. "We could do something different. Not in the traditional art galleries that are only frequented by the elite. Something more accessible, maybe in an alternative space. It could be a charity event, with part of the profits going to social projects that use art as a tool for transformation." As he spoke, the idea took shape, becoming more concrete. Luisa watched him, her expression gradually changing from skepticism to curiosity. "You're serious," she stated, "completely. And before you say this is just a fancy of a bored rich man, know that it's more than that. It's about rediscovering something we lost, Luisa. You because of a man who betrayed your trust, me because of the expectations imposed by my last name." Luisa closed her sketchbook and looked at the city below them. For a long moment, she simply gazed at the horizon, as if searching for answers in the architectural lines of the capital. "It would have to be on my terms," he finally said. "No manipulation, no fabricated stories, no artificially inflated prices." "Absolutely," Tiago agreed. "Honest art, fair prices, real purpose. And I would need time to create new works. I don't want to expose anything from my past." "How long would you need?" Luisa thought for a moment. 3 months at least." "Done," Tiago replied without hesitation. "I can convert the studio in my apartment for you to use. It's bigger and better equipped than any space you'd find." For rent. What about your work? She asked. Won't the Miller companies miss their president? Tiago smiled. I have competent executives who can manage the day-to-day. Plus, my sister is more than ready to take on more responsibility. To be honest, she's always been better at it than me. At that moment, they heard the excited voices of the twins who had woken from their nap. Their conversation was interrupted, but something had changed between them. A silent agreement, a shared purpose that bound them together. During dinner, while the four of them were eating pizza in the living room, something that would never have happened before Luisa arrived. Fernanda called to inform that she would need to extend her stay in Nuvem Alta for a few more days due to business complications. Will the boys be okay with you and Luisa? She asked. Sure, Tiago replied, exchanging a knowing look with Luisa. Actually, we're having a lot of fun. After hanging up, he turned to his nephews. What do you think about going to Lumia Park tomorrow? We can have a picnic. The boys screamed with joy, and Luisa looked at him with an expression of surprise. What's wrong? He asked. Nothing, she replied with a smile. I'm just trying to picture Tiago Muller, the real estate titan, sitting on a blanket in the park eating sandwiches. There are many things about me that you still don't know, Luisa Corvin, he replied with a sparkle in his eyes. Over the weekend, Tiago took the twins and Luisa to the park, where they all shared relaxed moments that strengthened their bond. There she revealed that she missed the art world, and he reaffirmed his admiration for her talent. At the end of the day, as they were heading home, Gustavo asked an innocent question that took the adults by surprise. Uncle Tiago, will Aunt Lou be our real Aunt One? Teosu Tiago almost choked while Luisa turned red as a tomato. What do you mean, Gugu? Asked Tiago, trying to buy time. Mommy said that when a man and a woman look at each other the way you and Aunt Lou look at each other, they usually get married, the boy explained, with the relentless logic of children. Gabriel, not wanting to be left behind, added, and Mom told Uncle Paulo that she thought you two were a good match because Aunt Lou doesn't care about your money. Now it was Tiago's turn to blush. Your mother has been talking too much, he muttered, giving an apologetic look to Luisa, who seemed to not know where to stand. The awkwardness was momentarily saved by the arrival at the penthouse. The boys ran to the shower, leaving the adults in the living room with a heavy silence between them. Children and their imaginations, right? Luisa said, trying to sound casual. Yes, of course, Tiago agreed quickly, but something had subtly changed between them. After the children were put to bed, Tiago invited Luisa for a glass of wine on the balcony. The night was clear, with a full moon illuminating the city. About the exhibition, he began, deciding to return to safer ground. I've been thinking about locations. What do you think about using the old Miller Industries warehouse? It's a historic building that's been empty for years, waiting for a revitalization project. Wouldn't it be very expensive to adapt a place like that for an exhibition? She asked, worried. In fact, it would be perfect. The space has that industrial aesthetic that is trending in the art world. We could preserve the essence of the place, just making the necessary adaptations for safety and adequate lighting of the works. As they discussed the details, their enthusiasm grew. The exhibition project became increasingly concrete, evolving from an abstract idea to a detailed plan. They decided that, in addition to their own works, they would create a space for young artists from peripheral communities, giving them visibility and the opportunity to sell their work without exploitative middlemen. This could really make a difference, Luisa said, her eyes shining with the possibility. Most of these young people have incredible talent, but no access to the traditional art circuit. And we could establish an ongoing program, Tiago added. Use part of the resources from Miller companies to create scholarships and artist residencies. It was as if a dam had broken inside him, releasing years of pent-up ideas and abandoned dreams. With Luisa, he felt he could be vulnerable, that he could share his true desires without fear of judgment or ridicule. You know, she said softly, when your sister hired me, I really didn't want to take the job. Why? Well, you have a certain reputation, she replied hesitantly. In the media, you're portrayed as a ruthless playboy who only cares about profits and parties. Tiago laughed, but it was a humorless laugh. The media loves its villains. I'm glad I was wrong, Louisa said, her eyes meeting his. So wrong. The moment was interrupted by the ringing of Tiago's cell phone. He looked at the screen and frowned. I need to answer. It's my assistant. It must be urgent for him to call. At this time. As Tiago walked away to answer the call, Louisa remained on the balcony, gazing at the stars above the illuminated city. She was entering unknown and potentially dangerous territory. The attraction she felt for Tiago was undeniable, but their worlds could not be more different. On top of that, there was the ghost of her past as an artist, the still open wounds, left by Ricardo's betrayal, and the fear of exposing herself again. Tiago returned with a worried expression. Problems? She asked. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow, he replied, but his tone suggested otherwise. Louisa, what we were discussing, there's something you should know before we commit to this project. What? Tiago hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. Mueller Enterprises has a complicated history with the capital's artistic community. My father wasn't exactly a patron of the arts. In fact, he was responsible for the demolition of several cultural spaces to make way for commercial ventures. Louisa nodded slowly. I know, the Cultural Center, the Popular Theater. Did you know these places? Asked Tiago, surprised. The Cultural Center was where I had my first art class when I was 8, she replied, a note of sadness in her voice. It was demolished 10 years ago to make way for the Mueller Plaza shopping mall. The weight of this revelation fell upon Tiago like an avalanche. His father had destroyed the place that had awakened the artist in Louisa. It was a connection he could never have imagined, a cruel twist of fate. I didn't know, he murmured. I'm sorry, Louisa. It wasn't your fault, she said, but there was a distance in her voice that hadn't been there moments before. Indeed it was, Tiago insisted. I was already working at the company at the time. I signed those documents, approved those projects. I was following in my father's footsteps without question. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken revelations and unexpected connections. They were connected not only by the present they were beginning to build together, but by a past that placed them on opposite sides of the same story. Maybe that's why this project is so important, Louisa said finally. Not just for us personally, but as a form of reparation. Tiago felt a surge of admiration for her. Where he had expected judgment, he found understanding. Where he had feared rejection, he found a chance for redemption. Thank you, he said simply, knowing she would understand everything those words carried. When Louisa got up to go to bed, Tiago accompanied her to the door of her room. There was a tension in the air, an unexpressed desire that they could both feel. Good evening, Tiago, she said softly. Good evening, Louisa, he replied, resisting the urge to move closer. As she closed the door, Tiago stood in the hallway for a moment, reflecting on how his life had changed so drastically in just a few days. With Louisa, he glimpsed the possibility of a different existence, a life with purpose, with passion, with art. What he didn't know was that destiny had even more surprises in store, and that the bonds that were beginning to form between them were deeper than anyone could have imagined. The week that followed brought Tiago and Louisa closer together. Even after Fernanda returned and took the twins back to Nueva Malta, Tiago found excuses for Louisa to stay in the apartment. Officially, she was there to use the studio and work on the pieces for the exhibition. Unofficially, they both knew there was something more going on, a connection that deepened with each conversation, with each glance exchanged over cups of coffee. One Sunday morning, Tiago found Louisa already working in the studio. She was completely absorbed, paintbrush in hand, in front of a canvas that depicted an urban scene of the capital. It was not, however, the typical skyline seen on postcards, but a view of the city from the perspective of those who live on the outskirts, colorful tenements, clotheslines strung between buildings, children playing in narrow alleys. That's amazing, he commented, making her jump. Tiago, I didn't hear you come in. He smiled, moving closer to examine the work better. You have a gift for capturing the soul of places, you know, not just their physical appearance. Louisa blushed slightly at the compliment. Thank you, that's how I see the city. Not just concrete and glass, but people, stories, lives, intertwined. That's exactly how I used to try to paint too, Tiago said, a note of nostalgia in his voice. Before you take over the family business, she added, why don't you paint something today? The suggestion took him by surprise. Now? Why not? It's your studio after all. Tiago hesitated. It had been years since he had picked up a paintbrush with any serious intention of creating. His last attempts had been frustrating, as if something inside him had dried up, a creative source that no longer flowed. I don't know if I know how to do this yet, he admitted. Louisa put down her paintbrush and approached him. Without saying a word, she took his hand and led him to an empty easel next to hers. She selected a blank canvas, prepared some basic paints on the palette, and handed him a paintbrush. Have you signed up yet? Do it now and tell us which city you're following us from. Don't think too much, she instructed. Just let your hand move. There was something so comforting about her presence, such complete acceptance, that Tiago felt his inner resistance dissolve. He wet his brush and, without prior planning, began to paint. The first strokes were hesitant, almost fearful, but slowly a forgotten confidence began to emerge. They worked side by side for hours, in a comfortable silence, occasionally broken by comments about technique or colors. The outside world seemed to have disappeared. There were no phone calls, no meetings, no corporate responsibilities. Just two artists, their canvases, and the flow of time marked by the movement of brushes. When they finally stepped back to examine their work, Tiago felt a satisfaction he hadn't experienced in years. His painting was far from perfect, but there was something genuine about it. A cityscape that captured not just the visuals, but the chaotic, pulsating energy of the capital. See, Louisa said softly, it's still there. It just needed room to breathe. Their eyes met, and for a moment Tiago thought about kissing her. There was something in the air between them, a magnetism that made it hard to keep his distance. But before he could act, the intercom rang, breaking the spell of the moment. It must be the lunch I ordered, he said, reluctantly pulling away. But it wasn't the food delivery man. It was Dona Conceição, the housekeeper who had worked for the Müller family for more than 3 decades and who had taken care of Tiago since he was a child. My boy, exclaimed the grey-haired lady upon seeing him, hugging him with the familiarity of someone who had known him forever. I'm back from my sister's house in Minas, and I came to get those documents that were left in your safe, as we agreed before. I left. Of course, Chaser, Tiago replied affectionately. Come, they're in the office. As they walked down the hallway, they found Louisa coming out of the studio. Upon seeing her, Dona Conceição stopped abruptly, her eyes wide as if she had seen a ghost. My God in heaven, the lady murmured, putting her hand to her chest. It can't be. Dona Conceição, this is Louisa Corvin, Tiago introduced, confused by the housekeeper's reaction. Louisa, this is Conceição, practically my second mother. Louisa politely extended her hand, but Dona Conceição remained paralyzed, staring at her. Are you okay? Asked Louisa, worried. You are Anna Corvin's daughter? Dona Conceição asked in a trembling voice. Now it was Louisa's turn to look surprised. Yes. Do you know my mother? The old lady looked from Louisa to Tiago, and back to Louisa, an expression of shock and recognition on her face. Tiago, my son, we need to talk, in private. Something in the urgency of Dona Conceição's voice made Tiago understand that the matter was serious. He asked Louisa's permission and led the housekeeper to his office, closing the door behind them. What happened? Teresa, you look like you saw a ghost. The lady sat down heavily in one of the armchairs, still visibly shaken. That girl. Louisa, you don't know who she is, do you? Well, she's my nephew's nanny and a talented artist who's— No, my son, Dona Conceição interrupted, her voice now firm despite her emotion. She is your cousin. The words fell like a bolt of lightning on Tiago, who sat up abruptly, trying to process the information. My cousin, what do you mean? Anna Corvin was the sister of his mother, Tiago. That's impossible, he replied. My mother had no sisters. She was an only child. Donna Conceição shook her head sadly. No, my son. That's what your father wanted everyone to believe. In fact, your mother had a younger sister, Anna. The two were very close until... Until what, Chaser? Tiago pressed, feeling that he was about to discover a long-buried secret. Until Anna fell in love with a street artist who sold his works in Republic Square. A man of talent, but without a name or fortune. Her grandfather, Old Miller, completely disapproved of the relationship. When Anna became pregnant, he disowned her and expelled her from the family. Her mother tried to intercede, but the old man was relentless. Her father, wanting to please the father-in-law on whom he depended financially at the time, forbade her mother from having contact with her sister. Tiago was stunned. And my mother accepted this. What choice did she have, my son? She was already married, expecting you. But deep down she never forgot her sister. She kept a hidden album with pictures of the two of them, which she looked at when she was alone. She tried, several times over the years, to find Anna in secret. But she seemed to have disappeared. After your mother left us, I found among her belongings letters that she had written to her sister but never sent. The revelation was too much for Tiago to take in at once. His entire family history, which had seemed so clear and defined, suddenly turned out to be built on secrets and lies. And are you absolutely sure that Luisa is this Anna's daughter? I do, my son. I knew Anna very well. Luisa is the image of her mother when she was young. And then there's the name. Your mother always said that if she had a daughter, she would name her Luisa, in honor of your grandmother. Tiago stood up, pacing restlessly around the office as he tried to organize his thoughts. We need to tell her, he said finally. Are you sure, my son? This is quite a revelation. She has the right to know, Checha, and I also have the right to know my real family. When they returned to the living room, they found Luisa sitting on the couch, absent-mindedly leafing through an art magazine. When she saw the expression on Tiago's face, she immediately realized that something serious had happened. Is everything okay? She asked, worried. Luisa, Tiago began, sitting down next to her. Donna Conceição just told me something. That will seem unbelievable. With the help of the housekeeper, Tiago related the whole story. The banished sister, the forbidden love, the forced separation of the sisters. As he spoke, he watched the emotions cross Luisa's face. Shock, disbelief, confusion, and finally, an understanding that seemed to light her face. My mother always said she had a sister, Luisa said when Tiago finished his story. But she said she had left this world a long time ago. She never said anything more than that, and I learned not to ask because it made her very sad. She probably believed that her sister did not want contact, Donna Conceição explained, gently. Her mother did not know that it was Old Miller and Tiago's father who were preventing communication. So we're cousins? Luisa asked, looking at Tiago as if she saw him in a new light. First cousins, he confirmed, still trying to process the fact. A thick silence fell over the room as they both processed the implications of this revelation. The attraction they had felt for each other, the moments of intimacy they had shared over the past few days, everything now took on a new dimension, both more complex and unexpected. I always wanted to have a bigger family, Luisa finally said, a hesitant smile playing on her lips. I grew up with just my mother. My father left us when I was 5. I grew up in a mansion full of people, but I always felt alone, Tiago replied, except with my mother and then with Fernanda. Your mother? My aunt? What was she like? Asked Luisa, her eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. Tiago felt a lump in his throat. It was rare for him to talk about his mother, whose premature departure had left a void that had never been filled. She was luminous, he said, his voice choked with emotion. She had the most infectious laugh you could imagine. She loved art, music, poetry. She was the only one who really encouraged me to paint, even against my father's wishes. She looks a lot like my mother, Luisa commented, a tear rolling down her face. I think they really were sisters. Donna Conceição, who was watching the scene with teary eyes, cleared her throat slightly. I have something you might want to see, she said, opening the bag she was carrying. From inside, she took out an envelope yellowed with age. They are photos of the two of you together, which I have kept all these years. Your mother asked me to hide them from your father, Tiago. With trembling hands, Tiago opened the envelope. Inside were several black and white photographs showing two smiling young women, hugging each other in different settings, a beach, a park, what appeared to be a party. The resemblance between them was undeniable, as was Luisa's resemblance to the younger of the two. This is your mother, he said, handing one of the photos to Luisa. My mother, Helena, and your mother, Anna. Luisa took the photo reverently, studying the sisters' smiling faces. They look so happy here. They were inseparable, confirmed Donna Conceição, until money and prejudice separated them. The afternoon passed, with the three of them sharing stories and memories, filling in the gaps of a fractured family history. For Tiago, each new piece of information about the aunt he had never met brought a deeper understanding not only of Luisa, but of his own mother. For Luisa, discovering this lost family connection was like finding a crucial piece of a puzzle she didn't even know was incomplete. When Donna Conceição finally said goodbye, it was already night. Tiago and Luisa remained in the living room, sitting side by side on the sofa, in a silence full of emotions and revelations. That changes everything, doesn't it? Luisa said finally. It changes a lot of things, Tiago agreed, but it doesn't change the fact that I want to move forward with our plans for the exhibition. In fact, it makes even more sense now. Like this. It's a way to honor our mothers, to reconnect what was separated by greed and prejudice. We can dedicate the exhibition to them. Luisa's eyes lit up at the idea. It would be perfect. Helena and Anna, separated sisters, reunited through the art of their children. At that moment, something new was born between them. Not the romance that seemed to be blossoming before the revelation, but an equally deep bond. A rediscovered family bond, a complicity based on shared roots and intertwined histories. We need to tell Fernanda, Tiago said suddenly. She has the right to know she has a cousin. Do you think she'll accept me? Luisa asked, a rare vulnerability in her voice. Fernanda? Absolutely. She always felt like our family was too small. She'll be thrilled to know she has another relative, especially one so talented. Luisa smiled, more relaxed. And as for the exhibition, what do we do now? We've turned this into something bigger, Tiago replied, a new determination in his voice. Not just an art exhibition, but an event of family reconciliation, a settling of accounts with the past, and most importantly, a new beginning for the Müllers and the Corvins. What neither Tiago nor Luisa could have imagined at that moment was how this family discovery would fundamentally alter the course of their lives, and how the exhibition project would turn into something much bigger than they had initially planned. Fate, which had already brought them together in an unexpected way, had even more surprises in store for the newly discovered cousins. The news that Luisa was Tiago and Fernanda's cousin quickly transformed the dynamic between them. What had once been a budding romantic attraction turned into an intense family bond, as if they were trying to make up for decades of separation in a matter of days. For Luisa, who had grown up with only her mother, finding this extension of her family brought a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. Fernanda flew from Nova Malta as soon as Tiago told her the news over the phone. When she arrived at the apartment, she hugged Luisa with an emotion that surprised everyone. "My God, how did we not notice before?" Fernanda exclaimed, holding Luisa's face between her hands. "You have the same eyes as our mother, that specific shade of brown, almost amber when the light catches it." The three cousins' reunion lasted well into the night as they shared family, stories and old photos that Fernanda had brought with her. The twins, though too young to fully understand the situation, were thrilled with the news that Aunt Lou was truly part of the family. We have to tell your mother, Fernanda told Luisa. Anna deserves to know that she was never forgotten by... Helena? Luisa looked down, a shadow of sadness crossing her face. My mother has been in a nursing home for almost a year. Early onset Alzheimer's. She has good days and bad days. I don't know if she could process this information now. Tiago felt a tightness in his chest at this revelation. Why have you never mentioned this before? It's not something I talk about often, Luisa replied, shrugging. It's too painful to watch someone you love slowly lose their memories. We could visit her together, Fernanda suggested gently. Even if she doesn't fully understand who we are, perhaps she'll find comfort in being surrounded by family. The suggestion moved Luisa deeply. Would you do that? Of course, Tiago replied without hesitation. We're family now. The Eye. Next day, the three of them traveled to Emberel, a small artistic town on the outskirts of the capital, where Anna Corvin was residing in a specialized clinic. The place was pleasant, surrounded by well-kept gardens and with a welcoming atmosphere that felt more like a guest house than a medical institution. When they entered Anna's room, they found a woman in her 60s sitting by the window, watching the birds in the garden. Even with the visible signs of illness, the resemblance to the young woman in the photographs was undeniable, the same delicate features that Luisa had inherited. Mom, Luisa called softly, coming closer. I brought some people who want to meet you. Anna turned slowly, her initially vague eyes coming into focus as she saw her daughter. A smile lit up her face. My girl, she said, holding out her hands. Then her gaze shifted to Tiago and Fernanda, and something strange happened. A look of confusion followed by a flash of recognition crossed her face. Helena, she murmured, fixing her eyes on Fernanda. An emotional silence filled the room. Fernanda, with tears in her eyes, slowly approached and knelt before the aunt she had never met. No, Aunt Anna, I'm Fernanda, Helena's daughter, your niece. Anna frowned, as if trying to organize fragmented thoughts. Helena, my sister. Yes, Fernanda confirmed kindly. And this is Tiago, your other nephew. Tiago stepped forward, taking his aunt's hands in his. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Aunt Anna. For a brief moment, an unusual clarity shone in the lady's eyes. You look like her, the same eyes. Then, turning to Louise, see, my daughter, I always said you had a family. They finally found us. The words, spoken with such lucidity amid the usual haze of her condition, moved everyone. For the next hour, Anna wavered between moments of clarity and confusion, but the important thing was that somehow she recognized the family bond, as if somewhere deep in her mind, this truth had remained intact, waiting to be rediscovered. Onday. The way back to the capital, a contemplative silence filled the car. It was Fernanda who finally broke it. I can't believe our father and grandfather did this. To separate two sisters, to deny a part of the family the right to exist for us, it's almost criminal. It was a different time, Tiago commented, although he also felt anger at the injustice committed. But that doesn't make it any less wrong. And to think that we grew up with all those privileges as Luisa and Aunt Anna. We didn't suffer, Luisa interrupted gently. My mother was an extremely capable woman. She became a respected artisan in Embu, had her own ceramics shop, and she gave me an excellent education with much sacrifice. Even so, Fernanda insisted, you were entitled to a share of the Müller fortune. You were family. Money was never important to my mother, Luisa replied. What hurt her was losing her sister, not the inheritance. Tiago, who had been driving in silence until then, made a sudden decision. Instead of heading towards the apartment in Valberia, he changed direction. Where are we going? Fernanda asked, noticing the change in route. To the old warehouse, he replied. I want to show you both the space we're thinking of using for the exhibition. Half an hour later, they parked in front of an imposing brick building built in the early 20th century. The former Müller Industries warehouse took up almost an entire block, its industrial architecture preserved despite years of abandonment. It's beautiful, Louisa murmured as they walked through the vast empty space, the evening light filtering through the tall, dusty windows, creating golden patterns on the concrete floor. I've been ignoring this place for years, Tiago admitted. My father wanted to tear it down and build a shopping mall, but I always resisted. Something told me this space had a greater purpose. It's perfect for a gallery, Fernanda commented, slowly turning to take in the grandeur of the place. It has character, history, and it's in a neighborhood that needs cultural revitalization, not another shopping mall, added Louisa. As they explored the interior of the warehouse, discussing possibilities and visualizing how the ID space could be transformed, an idea began to take shape, something bigger and more significant than the temporary exhibition they had initially planned. What if this wasn't just an exhibition? Tiago suggested, his voice echoing off the brick walls. What if we turned this place into a permanent cultural center? Louisa and Fernanda stopped, looking at him with renewed interest. A center where artists from peripheral communities could exhibit their work, he continued, excited about the idea. With educational programs, artistic residencies, workshops, for children and young people. The Müller-Corvin Cultural Center, Fernanda added, a smile lighting up her face. It would be a way to correct the mistakes of the past, Louisa reflected. Your father destroyed cultural spaces to build commercial ventures. You would transform an abandoned commercial space into a cultural center. Exactly, Tiago agreed. A form of family redemption. There, beneath the high ceiling of the old warehouse, the three cousins sealed a silent pact. They would transform that space into a symbol of reconciliation and renewal, both for their families and for the surrounding community. In the weeks that followed, the project took shape and gained momentum. Fernanda, with her talent for business and administration, took charge of the financial and logistical aspects. Tiago used his contacts at the City Hall to expedite the necessary permits and began the process of registering the building as a historical heritage site. Louisa, with her experience in the art world, began developing the cultural program and establishing contacts with emerging artists from the capital's outskirts. At night, after long days of work at the warehouse, Tiago and Louisa would return to their apartment in Valberia, where they continued to paint side by side in the studio. What was initially intended to be a small exhibition of their works had become the inaugural project of the Cultural Center, an exhibition entitled Lazos de Sangue, Historias Entrelazadas, Blood Ties, Intertwined Stories, which would tell the saga of the Müller and Corvin families through art. One of those nights, while they were working in silence, Louisa asked a question that had been bothering her. Tiago, do you regret it? That we found out we're cousins, I mean. He stopped painting, pondering the question. Why would I regret it? Louisa hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Because before the revelation, there was something happening between us. Something beyond friendship. Tiago put down his brush and turned to face her. Yes, there were, he admitted, and it would be a lie to say those feelings simply disappeared. But what we found in their place, this familial connection, this shared purpose, is perhaps even more precious. I think the same, Louisa agreed, a serene smile on her lips. It's as if destiny had other plans for us. That same week, a new element entered the equation. During a visit to the warehouse to oversee the start of renovations, Louisa met Raphael Schaufer, the architect hired for the restoration project. Tall, with dark skin and intense green eyes, Raphael was known for his work preserving historic buildings and for his approach that combined respect for the past with contemporary functionality. You must be Louisa Corvin, he said, extending his hand as Tiago introduced them. Tiago has told me a lot about you and your artwork. Something in the way Raphael looked at Louisa, with genuine interest and undisguised admiration, did not go unnoticed by Tiago, nor did the slight blush that colored his cousin's cheeks when their hands touched. In the days that followed, it became clear that there was a mutual attraction between the artist and the architect. Working together on the design of the cultural center, they shared an aesthetic and social vision that brought them together naturally. Raphael, who had grown up in a community on the southern edge of the capital and had earned his place in the competitive world of architecture through hard work and talent, deeply understood the importance of democratizing access to art and culture. "You're creating something revolutionary here," he said one afternoon as he walked with Louisa through the warehouse, discussing the layout of the exhibition spaces. A cultural center run by one of the wealthiest families in the capital, but genuinely geared toward peripheral artists, without the paternalistic approach we see in so many similar projects. "The credit goes mainly to Tiago," Louisa replied. "It was his vision to transform an abandoned family heritage into something that would benefit the community." "But you brought the perspective needed to make it happen," Raphael insisted. "Tiago told me how you changed his view on many things." The comment made Louisa smile. It was true that her presence had catalyzed significant changes in her cousin's life, just as he had in hers. What had begun as a chance encounter between a lonely businessman and a nanny sleeping in the hallway had turned into a journey of rediscovery, of family roots, artistic passions, and life purposes. As the project progressed, Tiago watched the blossoming relationship between Louisa and Raphael with mixed feelings. On the one hand, there was an inevitable remnant of what could have been between him and Louisa before the revelation of their relationship. On the other, he felt genuine happiness at seeing his cousin rediscovering not only her identity as an artist, but also opening herself up to new emotional possibilities. As the cultural center took shape, Louisa became close to Raphael Schaefer, the architect responsible for the warehouse's restoration, whose social sensitivity and passion for art reflected the project's ideals. The connection between the two grew naturally, and Tiago, although he had had feelings for Louisa before they discovered their relationship, now observed her with serenity and affection, recognizing in her a partner in artistic and family life, not a romantic one. The bond between the three cousins grew stronger, and Fernanda, with her attentive gaze, summed it up well. Perhaps the greatest gift that Louisa had brought them was the chance to rebuild what history had separated. What none of them could have imagined at the time was that the journey was far from over. The opening of the Müller-Corvin Cultural Center would bring even more surprising revelations, tying together the loose threads of a family history that stretched far beyond what they had known until then. There were only 3 days left until the inauguration of the Müller-Corvin Cultural Center. The warehouse was buzzing with the final preparations for the exhibition Blood Ties, which visually told the story of the Müller and Corvin families. Tiago and Fernanda were adjusting the details, while Louisa was looking for Aunt Anna for the visit. Her aunt's presence moved everyone, especially when she saw the mural with the family tree. An unexpected reaction from Anna to the name of a young artist, Joachim Sill, suggested new family connections that had not yet been revealed. As if answering a call from destiny, at that exact moment, Raphael entered the room, accompanied by a young man with curly hair and features that, upon closer inspection, bore a subtle resemblance to Louisa's, the same eye shape, the same determined chin. "Hello, everyone," Raphael said cheerfully. "This is Joachim Sill, the artist we mentioned yesterday. He's here to finish his installation and asked if he could meet Donna Anna as we agreed." A tense silence filled the room as Tiago, Fernanda, and Louisa observed the boy with new eyes, seeking confirmation for their suspicions in his features. "It's a pleasure to officially meet you," said Joachim, unaware of the tension in the room. "This project has changed my life. I never imagined I would have the opportunity to exhibit in a space like this." "Joachim," Tiago began cautiously, "we hope we don't seem intrusive, but could you tell us about your family, specifically about your grandfather?" The young man seemed surprised by the question, but answered without hesitation. "My paternal grandfather, Antonio Sill. He was an artist too. He sold drawings and paintings in the Praça da República in the 70s and 80s. He was the one who taught me to draw before he left us 5 years ago." Louisa felt her legs weaken and had to lean on a nearby table. "And your father?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Carlos Sill. He is also an artist. He works with wood sculptures. He has lived in Emborel for almost 30 years. The mention of Emborel, the same city where Anna had settled after leaving the Müller family, was the confirmation that was missing. Louisa exchanged meaningful glances with Tiago and Fernanda, all processing the same conclusion. "Joaquim," Louisa said finally, her voice more controlled now, "we would really like to meet your father. Could he come here today by any chance?" The young man seemed confused by the sudden interest in his family, but nodded. "Actually, he's waiting for me outside. He came to bring me some tools I forgot at home." "Could you call him, please?" Tiago asked kindly. Minutes later, Joaquim returned accompanied by a tall, thin, middle-aged man with grey hair tied in a ponytail and hands marked by woodworking. His eyes, the same amber-brown shade as Louisa and Anna's, scanned the group curiously. "My son said they wanted to meet me," Carlos Sil said. "I'm Carlos, Joaquim's father. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity they're giving him." Louise stepped forward, her heart pounding so hard it felt like everyone could hear it. "Mr. Sil, do you know a woman named Anna Corvin?" The question seemed to hit Carlos like a punch. He paled visibly, leaning on his son. Who are you?" he asked hoarsely. "My name is Louisa Corvin. Anna is my mother." Carlos looked at her with an intensity that made time seem to stand still. "Louisa," he repeated as if savoring the name. "Little Louisa. My father told me about you, many times." "Your father, Antonio Sil," Louisa continued, her voice cracking with emotion. "He and my mother, they were in love," Carlos added, nodding slowly, "until her family separated them. My father was already married to my mother at the time, but he never hid the fact that he loved Anna deeply. They had a brief relationship before he met my mother, but they were forced to separate by the Müller family." The revelation hung in the air, loaded with implications. It wasn't exactly what they had suspected. Joaquim wasn't Anna's direct son or grandson, but still there was a connection, an invisible thread that linked their stories. "When my mother passed away," Carlos continued, "my father moved to Emberel. He knew Anna was there, although he never tried to contact her directly. He respected the life she had built. But he told me stories about her, about the love they shared, about how she was forced to choose between her family and him." "And did you grow up there?" I asked Fernanda, trying to fill in the gaps in the story. "Yes, in fact, I knew Anna when I was young, although she didn't know who I was. I frequented her pottery shop, admiring her work. My father watched from afar, happy to know that she was doing well, that she had found her way as an artist." Louisa felt tears streaming down her face. The story was even more complex and beautiful than they had imagined. It was not only about the forced separation of two sisters, but also about a forbidden love that in a way never completely died. "My mother is in the Villa Verde nursing home in Embu," she said finally. "She has early onset Alzheimer's, but yesterday when she saw Joaquim's work, something in her clicked. She recognized his style, asked to meet him." Carlos nodded, excitement visible in his eyes. "Antonio taught me all his techniques, and I passed them on to Joaquim. It's no wonder she recognized something familiar in his work." "Would you like to see her?" Tiago asked. "We could go together today." "Yes," Carlos replied without hesitation. "After so many years, I think the time has come, and I'm sure my father, wherever he is, would like Joaquim to meet Anna." As the group prepared for the visit that promised to close yet another circle, in this complex family history, Tiago couldn't help but reflect on the strange ways of fate. What had begun as a chance encounter with a sleeping nanny in his apartment had unfolded into an intricate tapestry of connections lost and rediscovered, of loves interrupted and dreams reborn. And tomorrow, at the opening of the Müller Corvin Cultural Center, all these intertwined stories would be publicly celebrated, a testament to the power of art to unite what has been separated and to heal old wounds through creative expression. As he watched Louisa chatting animatedly with Carlos and Joaquim, discovering common ground and sharing stories, Tiago felt a deep certainty. This was just the beginning of something much bigger, a new phase not only for their reunited families, but for the entire artistic community that would find a home in this space born of love, loss, and reconciliation. The morning of the inauguration of the Müller Corvin Cultural Center dawned with a flawlessly blue sky over the capital, as if the city itself had conspired to make the day perfect. From the early hours, the former warehouse was bustling with final preparations. Employees were adjusting details of the decoration, technicians were testing lights and sound, waiters were arranging the tables for the cocktail reception that would follow the official ceremony. Tiago arrived early, wearing a navy blue suit that contrasted with the informality he had adopted in recent months. It was a formal day after all, a milestone not only in his personal life, but in the city's cultural history. He walked slowly through the space, taking in every detail, every carefully positioned work of art, every architectural element, restored with precision by Raphael. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago, this very place had been an abandoned warehouse, a symbol of the industrial past that the city was trying to forget. "Nervous?" Fernanda asked, joining her brother in his morning inspection. She looked stunning in an emerald green dress, her hair pulled back in an elegant bun. "Strangely no," Tiago replied with a calm smile. "I feel more like I'm finally arriving home. After a long journey." Fernanda nodded, understanding perfectly what he meant. "Where is Louisa?" "She went to pick up Aunt Anna. After yesterday's visit, the doctors authorized her to spend the whole day here. Carlos and Joaquim will come pick them up." The mention of their meeting the day before brought a special light to both their eyes. The visit to the clinic had been exciting beyond expectation. When Anna saw Carlos, there was a moment of initial confusion, followed by a flash of recognition that lit up her face like a ray of sunlight piercing thick clouds. "You are Antonio's son?" she had said, holding out her trembling hands. "You have his eyes." Carlos, visibly moved, held her hands gently. "Yes, Donna Anna, my father spoke a lot about you." "Is he still alive?" she asked, a fragile hope in her voice. "No, Mum. He left us 5 years ago." A shadow of sadness had crossed Anna's face, but it had quickly dissipated as Joaquim approached. She had studied the young man intently, as if absorbing every detail of his appearance. "You draw like him," he said, a soft smile on his lips. "The hands, especially. Antonio had a unique way of drawing hands." It was as if Carlos and Joaquim's presence had unlocked something in Anna's mind, memories that the disease had not yet completely stolen, preserved in some deep recess of her consciousness. For the first time in months, she had spent hours relatively lucid, sharing fragmented stories of her relationship with Antonio, questions about his life afterward, observations about Joaquim's resemblance to his grandfather. For Louisa, it was a revelation. She had never seen her mother so excited, so present since the beginning of her illness. For Carlos and Joaquim, it was a connection with a part of their family history that they only knew through Antonio's stories. And for Tiago and Fernanda, it was another piece of the family puzzle fitting together perfectly. The sound of excited voices interrupted Tiago's reminiscences. Louisa arrived, accompanied by Raphael, Carlos, and Joaquim, who gently pushed the wheelchair where Anna was sitting. The lady looked splendid in a turquoise dress, her white hair arranged in an elegant hairstyle, light makeup highlighting her features that were still beautiful despite her age and illness. "Look at you, Aunt." "Anna!" Fernanda exclaimed, coming closer to kiss her aunt. "You look stunning." "A special occasion deserves a special effort," Anna replied with surprising clarity. It was one of her good days, perhaps the best in a long time. Louisa was also radiant, wearing a red dress that complemented her dark skin. There was a confidence in her posture that hadn't been there when Tiago had first met her. She was no longer the shy nanny sleeping in the hallway, or the insecure artist who doubted her talent. She was a woman who had found not only her family but herself again. "The mayor just confirmed he's coming," she announced, showing the message on her phone, "and 3 city secretaries." "Journalists are already lining up outside," Raphael added. "There's a considerable line forming as well. It looks like we'll have a full house." Tiago checked his watch. There were still 2 hours until the official opening. "Let's have one last meeting before the madness begins," he suggested, leading the group to a back room that would serve as the center's administrative office. Once settled in, Tiago looked around at the faces around him. His extended Family, brought together by extraordinary circumstances. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you, he began, emotion evident in his voice. A few months ago, I was just another lonely, wealthy executive, fulfilling obligations that brought me no satisfaction. Today, we are about to inaugurate a space that will transform the cultural life of this city, and more importantly, it will transform our own lives. You're the one who made all this possible, Tiago, Louisa commented. Your vision, your generosity. No, he interrupted gently. It was you, Louisa. It was you who fell asleep in that hallway on the exact night that allowed our paths to cross. It was your authenticity that made me question my choices, your art that reignited my own creativity, your story that reconnected us with a past that had been denied us. Anna, who had been watching the scene with shining eyes, reached out to hold Tiago's hand. Helena would be so proud of you, my nephew, of all of you. And Antonio would also be proud, Carlos added, to know that families that were separated by prejudice and social conventions are finally reunited. We have an announcement to make, Tiago said, exchanging a knowing look with Fernanda. Something we decided a few weeks ago, but we wanted to keep it as a surprise for today. Fernanda continued. We are creating a foundation, the Müller-Corvin Foundation for the Arts. In addition to managing this cultural center, the foundation will offer scholarships to young artists from peripheral communities, finance artistic residencies, and develop educational programs in public schools. And we want you to be part of this, Tiago added, looking at Luisa, Rafael, Carlos, and Joaquim. Not just as artists or collaborators, but as part of the board. This is no longer, say, a Müller project. It is a project of all our families together. The announcement was met with expressions of surprise and excitement. For Luisa, in particular, it represented an opportunity to transform her rediscovered passion for art into a vehicle to help other talents flourish. There is one more thing, Tiago said, turning to Anna. Auntie, with your permission, we would like to establish a special program in your name, the Anna Corvin Atelier, dedicated specifically to women artists who face social or economic barriers. Anna's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say, she murmured, visibly touched. Say yes, Louisa suggested softly, kneeling beside her mother's chair. Your work as a ceramicist in Embu has inspired so many women over the years. This program will be an extension of that legacy. Anna nodded, unable to speak through the tears that were now streaming freely down her face. The moment was interrupted by a discreet knock on the door. It was one of the assistants, informing that the first VIP guests had already arrived and were being received in the outdoor area. Showtime, Fernanda said, standing up and adjusting her dress. Everyone ready? As the group prepared to leave the room, Tiago asked for a moment alone with Luisa. When the others left, he took a small package from the inside pocket of his jacket. I wanted to give you this before the ceremony, he said, handing the package to his cousin. Intrigued, Luisa opened the package, revealing a delicate silver medallion. Upon opening it, she found a miniature photograph of a young Helena and Anna, hugging and smiling. Oh, Tiago, she murmured, emotion choking her voice. It belonged to my mother, your aunt, he explained. Dona Conceição gave it to me along with the photos. Apparently, she kept it hidden from my father as a way of keeping her sister close to her heart. I thought you should have it now. Luisa closed her fingers around the medallion, feeling its weight. Not just physical, but symbolic. It's the most precious gift I've ever received, she said finally, hugging her cousin tightly. Thank you. For this. For everything. When they finally joined the others at the main entrance to the cultural center, the scene that awaited them was impressive. A sizable crowd had already gathered outside, held back by ropes. Journalists positioned cameras and microphones. Photographers adjusted their lenses. The buzz of anticipation was palpable. At 4 p.m. sharp, Tiago stepped onto the small stage set up at the entrance and approached the microphone. The crowd gradually fell silent. Good afternoon, everyone, he began, his voice firm despite the emotion he felt. It is with great joy that we welcome you to the Müller-Corvin Cultural Center. This space was created not only as another cultural facility in our city, but as a symbol of reconciliation, of bridges built over chasms that seemed insurmountable. As Tiago talked about the history of the project, Luisa observed the crowd of attentive faces. There was the mayor sitting in the front row, art critics whose opinions she had feared so much in the past, young artists from the outskirts who would for the first time have the opportunity to exhibit in a prestigious space, residents of the neighborhood curious to see the new life of the old abandoned warehouse. This center is not just a physical space, Tiago continued, his voice gaining intensity. It is a manifesto against the cultural segregation that has for so long kept art as a privilege for the few, a manifesto against the forgetting of our family histories, our roots, a manifesto in favor of democratizing access to culture and valuing talents that would otherwise remain invisible. After briefly introducing the Müller-Corvin Foundation and its goals, Tiago invited Luisa to join him on stage. She walked confidently up the steps, the newly received medallion hanging around her neck, shining against the red of her dress. A few months ago, I was just a nanny who had abandoned her artistic career, convinced by outside voices that my work had no value in itself, she began, her clear voice reaching even the farthest reaches of the crowd. Today I stand before you not only as an artist reborn, but as part of a rediscovered family, with a greater purpose that transcends individual art. She briefly told the story of the separated families, of the sisters forbidden to communicate, of the love between Anna and Antonio interrupted by social prejudices. She spoke of how fate had reconnected these loose threads through the next generation, of how art had been the vehicle for this reconciliation. The exhibition we are opening today, Blood Ties, is not just a display of artwork. It is a visual narrative of separation and reunion, of loss and rediscovery. It is our family history transformed into art, so that others can find in it echoes of their own stories. After the speeches, Tiago and Luisa came down from the stage to symbolically cut the ribbon that gave access to the cultural center. When the doors finally opened, the crowd began to flow inside, eager to see the space and the works on display. The afternoon turned into evening as hundreds of people toured the facilities, admiring the works, talking to the artists, and participating in the interactive activities. The main exhibition, Blood Ties, attracted particular attention, with visitors often moved by the works that told the story of the Müller and Corvin families. In a moment of relative calm, Tiago found Luisa observing a group of teenagers who were enthusiastically interacting with a multimedia installation created by Joachim. "It's amazing, isn't it?" he said, stopping beside his cousin, "to see how art can connect people from such different worlds." "That's what it's for," Luisa replied, a serene smile on her lips, "to build bridges where before there were only chasms." Tiago nodded, feeling a deep peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. "You know, when you fell asleep in that hallway a few months ago, I was a completely different man. I was living a life that didn't belong to me, surrounded by people who didn't really know me." "What now?" she asked, turning to face him. "Now I feel like I've finally found my path. Not just as an artist or as a businessman or as a member of the Müller family, but as myself, Tiago, someone with purpose, with genuine connections." At that moment, Raphael approached, putting his arm affectionately around Luisa's waist. "The mayor is looking for you two. He wants to discuss the possibility of replicating this model in other neighborhoods in the city." "Let's go," Tiago said, smiling at the couple. The sight of Luisa happy next to Raphael brought him genuine joy, free from any trace of melancholy for what could have been between them. As they walked together through the crowded hall, Tiago spotted an elegant woman intently observing one of his paintings, a work that depicted his mother, Helena, as he imagined her if she was still, alive, looking out over the capital city from the top of a building. "Are you the artist?" she asked when she noticed him approaching. "Yes," Tiago replied, extending his hand. "Tiago Müller." "Beatrice Campos," she introduced herself, shaking his hand firmly. "I'm a curator at GAL. Your work intrigues me. It has an emotional honesty that's rare in the contemporary scene." As they talked about art and the Cultural Center project, Tiago felt an immediate connection with Beatriz, not just intellectual, but something deeper, like a mutual recognition of kindred spirits. When they exchanged contact details at the end of the conversation, there was an implicit promise that their meeting was just the beginning of something more. The evening wore on, and the event continued in full swing. In one particularly moving moment, Anna was led into the center of the main hall, where she received a special tribute and warm applause from the crowd. Her eyes shone with a lucidity that defied illness, as if the energy of the room and the significance of the moment kept the fog of Alzheimer's at bay temporarily. Near midnight, when most of the guests had already left and only a select group remained for a more intimate celebration, Tiago stepped onto the small stage again. Beside him were Luisa, Fernanda, Rafael, Carlos, Joaquim, and Anna in her wheelchair. "Today we celebrate much more than the opening of a cultural center," he said, raising a glass of champagne. "We celebrate the healing of old wounds, the reunion of separated families, the power of art to transcend social and economic barriers. But above all, we celebrate new beginnings." All raised their glasses in a silent toast, united by bonds that transcended blood, bonds of shared purpose, of common vision, of art as a vehicle for transformation. The following morning, the city's major newspapers carried enthusiastic headlines about the opening of the Miller-Corvin Cultural Center. Critics praised not only the quality of the exhibitions, but also the innovative concept of a space that genuinely democratized access to art. The story of families separated and reunited through art generated particular emotion, being highlighted in special reports and editorials. Within a week of opening, the center had already received more than 10,000 visitors, many of them from public schools and peripheral communities that rarely had access to quality cultural facilities. The Anna Corvin studio received applications from hundreds of women artists from all over the country, eager to participate in the artist residency program. For Tiago, each new day brought confirmation that he had finally found his true path. His mornings were now divided between administrative work at the foundation and hours spent painting in his studio. Evenings often included dinners with Beatriz, whose presence in his life brought a dimension of companionship and mutual understanding that he had never experienced before. Luisa and Rafael, growing closer, divided their time between projects at the Cultural Center and the renovation of a small house in Emborel, near the clinic where Anna lived. The rediscovery of her identity as an artist had brought Luisa not only professional recognition, her works were now sought after by collectors and galleries, but an inner confidence that was reflected in every aspect of her life. On a particularly significant afternoon, almost 3 months after the inauguration, the original group met again at the Cultural Center's office. Tiago, Luisa, Fernanda, Rafael, Carlos, and Joaquim had been summoned to a special meeting with the mayor, who was proposing an expansion of the project to 3 other peripheral neighborhoods of the city. "It looks like we've created a successful model," Fernanda commented, organizing the documents for the meeting. "We created more than that," Tiago replied, looking out the window at the inner courtyard where dozens of children were taking part in an art workshop. "We created a space where stories can be rewritten, where invisible talents are given a voice, where the past and the future meet through artistic expression." Luisa approached, holding the medallion that she now rarely took off her neck. "Do you know what impresses me most about all this? How a seemingly casual encounter, me asleep in the hallway of your apartment, could trigger such a profound transformation in so many lives." "Maybe it wasn't so random after all," Fernanda suggested. "Maybe our mothers somewhere conspired to reunite their families." The idea, though poetic, resonated with a truth they all felt. There was something almost magical about the way their paths had crossed, like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their rightful places. As they walked together through the corridors of the Müller-Corvin Cultural Center to greet the mayor, each of them was certain that the journey that had begun with an unexpected encounter, was far from over. It was, in fact, just the first chapter of a larger story. A story of art as a vehicle for transformation, of families reunited, of talents rediscovered, and lives reinvented. And at the center of it all, like a golden thread intertwining past, present and future, was the conviction that true value in life lay not in material possessions or social status, but in authentic human connections and the courage to follow the calling of the heart, even when the path seemed uncertain or frightening. For Tiago, who had once been just another lonely heir trapped in a life of appearances, and for Luisa, who had abandoned her artistic essence due to the wounds caused by a manipulative man, the cultural center represented much more than a successful project. It was the tangible symbol of their own journeys of redemption, the living monument to a simple but profound truth. It is never too late to rediscover who we really are and rewrite our own story. The more you comment and share, the more we Chimay can bring you stories that touch your heart. Leave your name in the comments and we may include you in one of our next stories with a special greeting. Just for you.